We're in progress now. We're live. Oh, we're live now. Yeah. Good afternoon and welcome to the Public Works meeting for June 28th. I'm going to call our meeting to order and see if there's any declarations of conflict. Not seeing any. I need someone to approve our agenda. Moved by His Worship, second by Councillor McAleer. I need someone to adopt our minutes of June the 8th, 2023. Can someone move to adopt? Okay, by His Worship, Councillor McAleer. Is there any business arriving from those minutes?
Madam Chair, just under, I think it's page, just one second, page 5, just following up on the street resurfacing. I know we had a great discussion at the last meeting, and I just wanted to ask if we're, moving forward or where we're at. Could I ask through the chair to the manager?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So we're aiming to have that list back up to finance for public tendering by the end of next week.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. Trying to get it out so that it can be awarded by the end of early August and then kind of a late season paving program.
And just through the chair to the manager, I know that we own part of Royalty Road, which it runs between South Winslow Road and Brackley Point Road. Is it called the Royalty Junction? Mm-hmm. Royalty Junction. Could that be put on a list, or is that?
We'll look at it. So it's partly owned by the province as well. So that's something that we will have to discuss with the province.
Okay.
It would look kind of awkward if we do something in our area and they didn't do the rest of the road as well, because we only own a small portion of it.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. I'd like to follow along that because I know half of McWilliams Road was done this year with the intention of finishing it maybe next year with more money. But to me, if we're going to start a new road, it would make more sense to look at finishing a road that we've only done half of before we go starting a new road. And that would be something if you could maybe look at versus starting a new road.
And Madam Chair, just a point of clarification, I was just asking, because it's a joint-owned road, provincial and city, is that on our list? No, I wasn't asked to put it anywhere in the list. It's just, I wanted to clarify, that's all.
Oh, yeah. I'm just saying when the answer came back that because they owned half and they don't really like to do half a road, then that's a time when you want to be reminded that if we've only done half a road, we might want to look at finishing a road before we start a new road. That was my point. You're welcome. Thank you. All right, so we're going to move into reports. Welcome, Councillor Tweel. The first report is the speed bump policy review.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So from follow-up from last meeting, there was a request from the committee to kind of have a quick look at our current speed hump policy and how we install those things. So we had staff put together a little report on how many speed humps we have and how we've been operating to date. So right now we have about 75 temporary speed humps around the city. It takes about 2 weeks roughly for one crew to install them all, two, maybe a little bit more than that. All depends on a number of factors. In 2020, we adopted our current speed hump policy, which was intended to give a better outline on how we choose locations and clearly state that it's a resident-driven program, as they are the folks in the neighborhoods who are seeing the concerns. It has been working fairly well over the past little bit, but one of the big complaints and one of the things we hear a lot about is moving speed humps around because demographics change in neighborhoods, traffic issues change in neighborhoods, and it all depends on some of the work we or the province are doing around the area. And a good example is, as St. Peter's Road, as there's work done on St. Peter's Road, and that area has grown up, we're finding that we're seeing more traffic on Oak Drive. So again, demographics and traffic are changing, patterns are changing around the city. So one thing we're suggesting is right now, until we can do a full thorough review of the policy, and kind of combine that with other tools, as we like to call it, in our toolbox for traffic control and traffic calming, we would like to start off by making an amendment to our current policy where we have a time limit that's set on how long a speed hump is at any given location, before we have to receive a new application for that particular speed hump. And the reason why we're asking for this in support of council is, again, we have a number of speed humps that have been installed in locations for quite some time. And when this program was adopted, or the policy was adopted, apologies, it was a direction at the time to grandfather any speed hump that had been already in place prior to this policy. But again, just like I say, we have 75 speed humps out there. And I think the city would be a better benefit if we are able to move those around more, and serve the greater Charlottetown, or all the Charlottetown areas. And again, some of those speed humps, just because our policy, the way it is written right now, we don't think that they need to be there going back every year, but because they're grandfathered and we don't have a trigger to, or a way to remove them without a policy change, it makes it a little bit challenging for us to accommodate more requests for speed humps.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions for Scott?
I thank you.
Mr. Twill?
Yep. Thank you for your report, Scott. I do like the idea of moving around the speed humps. I think that that's much more productive. I've had concerns from residents that have applied for speed humps, and in some cases they work, in some cases they don't work. You know, let's be candid here. Some cases where it's a narrow street, the traffic going over these speed humps, there's a lot of clanging and banging, and it's an annoyance to some members of some residents in a neighborhood. But I have been questioned as to why certain sections of the city seem to have an overabundance of speed humps, while other parts of the city don't have any, or it's a very rare occurrence. So I think you're addressing that in your restructuring of your policy, and I think that'll be the opportunity for it to be spread out more. And you did say it's not really, I'm paraphrasing, advantageous to go back to the same locations year after year after year. Well, why do you say that?
It's a great question. Because what ends up happening is, so for instance, we get a request from, it's usually, again, it's a resident-driven program. So typically, one resident or a group of neighbors are very concerned about speeding or traffic running through a neighborhood street. They'll gather enough support around it for the signing of the document before we will review the policy, or before we will implement the policy and put out a speed hump. But what we find now is, you look at a lot of neighborhoods, there's a lot of turnover in a lot of these neighborhoods. The demographics on the street change from the residents themselves. So sometimes we have, and in the past we have removed speed humps because someone new to the neighborhood moved in, and they're right next to the speed hump and they don't like it. It's really loud. I can think of one instance. They worked overnight shifts, and so during the daytime when it's busier, they were trying to sleep and it was quite noisy. And so that's one reason. The other reason is, again, traffic patterns change from year to year, and it all depends on the work we do all around. We have a speed bump on Street A and we do work on Street B. That may impact the drivers that are coming on that street. That's why we're recommending to, again, have it a resident-driven program. They would still have to apply and get enough support from the residents, because we don't go back and say, okay, is there still enough support for this every year? Because we just don't have the resources to do that. So that's why we'd like to have a bit of a reset where Every couple years, a resident has to reapply and ensure that they have that neighborhood support for a speed hump.
Thank you, Scott. Councillor McAleer.
Yeah, thank you. Just to the chair or the chair to the manager, I'm not sure. My understanding, right, on your suggestions for change, that every 2 years the speed bump would need an application again. Is that
That's correct. Yep. Same process would have to be reapplied for every 2 years.
so? They'd just from square one have to get same,
So it wouldn't be the same full-blown process in terms of what we have to review. So say, for instance, Street A has a speed hump today, and this is the end of year 2. The residents would have until we set a date, April 30th, to get us a new application filled in. There'd be no further review on our part in terms of placement, and we also do we do a traffic study as well, just so that we understand.
So they'd need the application essentially, and
Correct.
75% of the residents on the street signatures, that piece.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I got the online version of whatever my agenda here. And on the disadvantages, I'm thinking maybe it's a typo. It says disadvantages, speed bumps. Anyway, it says speed humps may increase emergency vehicle response. I'm thinking is that a typo or is that
No,
right?
that's very correct.
I
Because
just thought it would decrease.
it can increase the response time. So instead of it taking them 2 minutes, it could increase it to 3 minutes. And it's primarily like if we look at ambulances and fire trucks. So you look at an ambulance that has a patient, they have to be very careful going over speed humps as to not eject the patient from their stretcher. A fire truck that's fully loaded, I'm thinking a tanker, for instance, they have to be very careful with their water load on it. If that shifts, they could tip, so they got to be very careful going over speed humps. So there are a number of disadvantages with speed humps, and that's part of the review process. That's why we don't recommend them on major thoroughfares or select streets that are priority routes for emergency services. Where those that list of disadvantages came from, there's a number of studies out there about speed humps, and our staff combed through them and created that list of disadvantages for everyone's knowledge.
And we'll be sure if this gets through to council and gets passed that this is well communicated through our comms and stuff, so people are aware of what the role
Absolutely.
is. Okay,
So, Madam Chair, could I ask?
absolutely.
A request for speed humps this year. I know there are some that I've received requests from different neighborhoods around the city. If we change this policy, it doesn't take effect immediately. It'll take effect future years, correct?
I think, Your Worship, it's saying they're not going to order any more if this can get kept passed, so it would be, the existing ones are in place already. And if the application has been submitted to Public Works with the signatures and the process has started, I'd assume you'd continue with the process, but you're not going to, you're not going to be ordering, we're not going to be accepting new applications once this is passed.
So just a supplementary question. So will the change, if this policy change or amendment passes council, will we have an opportunity for next year's applicants to get in the queue because now we're going to be shifting them around? Is that correct?
That's correct. It wouldn't be effective until May 1st when we start next year, when we start
Perfect.
identifying the locations. Yep.
Every person who has a speed hump at this time would then be required to reapply?
No, there would be it'd be the people that applied this year, because there have been a couple new ones this year. They would get it for next year, because they would fall under the 2-year.
So you would
next year would be
start
2 year.
2 years from now would be when all these speed humps that are placed across the city
Mm-hmm.
would have to come back into the queue.
So I guess, so there's kind of two categories. We have placed a couple new ones as of May 1st, 2023. Those, I think there might be one or two or three maybe. Those ones would continue on, they'd be year 2 next year. So those 2 or 3 would not need to reapply. Every other speed hump would have to be reapplication, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That means it could be 40 applications.
Yeah, it could be. And it also means that you're going to keep track on like paper that those 3 that don't have to are in 2 years from that time?
Well, we have all those records and
Okay.
spreadsheets. Oh, yeah, we've been, our data collection, record keeping has been
Okay.
quite well, good.
Counselor McLear?
Yeah, so maybe I'm not, maybe I'm not listening or it's not clear. So the existing ones that have been wherever they are in various wards that have been there for some time, when is the reset on them? Like today?
The reset, so if they're out today, they're going to stay out for the entire year.
Right.
So what we have for this year is set as of right now. For April 1st, 2024, then that's the reset date. So anyone that has a speed hump that hasn't submitted an application in the past year for a speed hump, those neighborhoods would have to reapply to get the speed hump placed back in place.
Would it be safe to maybe assume with this new policy that going forward, you anticipate that some of these, we have 75 until these applications get in, it might be a while before they get reset, approved to go out again. Is that maybe a
Yeah,
potential bottleneck potentially?
It shouldn't be a bottleneck because, again, all we require is the paperwork. We already know most of these locations have been vetted. They've had the traffic studies and all that stuff. So we can do a lot of the pre-work before we even receive the applications. But we will, again, as the chair mentioned, we want to stress to residents and get it out early that if you'd like to see your speed hump return next year, get your application in now. That just helps us as staff make sure that everything's in line and in order for when we start deploying them in May of next year. There's no hiccups. It's a pretty smooth sailing.
But would the review of the staff piece be looking at I guess the changes potentially in the neighborhood, or is that kind of all driven by the residents signing the application, or does the city take any does the Public Works and take any decision in where they'll go or continue to stay?
Absolutely. So if you have it on one street right now, there may be some adjustments. It may move down a couple of houses. It just depends on, proximity to existing intersections. Again, some of the neighborhoods too have changed in demographic. What I mean, there may be a couple single-family residences at one point or a vacant lot. Now something's built there. So we will make some adjustments as we go. Again, that will be part of the acceptance phase when we come back in. Like I say, I think most of them would end up going back to where they were. It'd be a quick 5-minute review of things. But there would be a few that require a little bit additional work, and that's why we're just recommending folks, as this goes through the process, we would hope people get their application in as quickly as they could, and then that way we can just pick away at the list.
And this speed hump these have been being placed for a long time. And it was only 2020, Councillor McLear, where we adopted the criteria. So I think part of it is that there's some speed humps that don't necessarily meet the criteria of what we've set in place. So in order to take away the grandfather version, we need to amend our policy in order to go in and look at where they best suit.
So this will be taking away the grandfather provision?
Possibly if it doesn't meet our criteria, correct?
That's correct, yep.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Twill, do you have another question?
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I mean, I'm given to understand, I stand to be corrected, Scott, but some neighborhood streets have a couple. Two, I've heard two.
Yeah, there are
maybe-
some.
Maybe even more.
There are
And-
definitely
and-
some that have
and-
multiple.
And, I've received, feedback from residents that kind of tour the city, and they've questioned me why, and I said, look, I have no idea how 2 or 3 ended up on one street, so,
And I
anyway,
can't.
and
yeah.
you're
Yeah.
aware of that.
Yeah, and I can't speak to what the decision-making was at those times, as a lot of those ones we weren't around for. But again, those are some of the things we review as part of the resubmissions for.
No, I
speed humps.
like your policy. I think we should give it a chance.
So what do I
The only-
need
the
then?
only thi- The only thing I would suggest, Scott, is some kind of release, do a release, to get this information out to the community.
Yeah,
You know,
we
you
will.
put it on your website and
For
get a
sure.
press release out to the residents.
We got to get it through council first, so that's kind of our next step is, are we having someone that is, do I have someone to move this to council for approval? Moved, seconded by Councillor McAleer. All those in favor of moving this to council? Okay, moved on. Thank you, Scott. The second report is the naming application that came to Public Works. And Scott, I'll let you speak to that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as everyone is familiar, the city has a municipal property naming policy in place. And through it, it doesn't mention specifically streets, but there is a clause in there, or a section about honorary naming of city infrastructure. And so we felt, talking with our Director Sue Fraser, that this could fall under that if approved by council. So we received an application from Stingray Radio and Ocean 100. We're requesting to honorarily rename a portion of Fitzroy Street in remembrance of a former employee, Carrie Wynn. And so I've had some talks with the applicant. We advised them we would never recommend a full street name change at all. Fitzroy Street is historical in nature, and that will stay legally. The street, the entire length of Fitzroy Street, will legally still be called Fitzroy Street. But what we are proposing is proposing just the block from Prince to Great George to honorarily name it Carrie Wynn Way. Part of your package, you'll see a mock-up of what the sign could look like at the end of the day. This is done in other cities around North America. You see it various cities. They all do it, just in a way to remember individuals from the community for various needs. So all the information is in the package, her biography and her impacts on the community. And we've, the staff have looked at it from Public Works, and we see no issue with approving this request.
Madam Chair?
Okay, just 1 second, Councillor Twill.
Yeah.
I did, when I looked at this, Scott, and it's, I have absolutely no problem, but our new policy, because I wasn't here when we approved it, doesn't include streets as part of the so we might want to amend that just moving forward. I don't know, did that come through strategic? No, it's, who did the naming policy? It wasn't planning that did the naming policy. I think it was strategic.
I think it was
Park.
through strategic.
I would just like to make that
Yes,
note to
it's strategic
include.
priorities, communication, intergovernmental affairs.
Just if we're going to have a policy,
Yeah.
we want to make sure we're following policy properly.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and that's why I had a review with our director as well, and we noted that it doesn't specifically name streets
Yeah.
for honorarily renaming them, but we felt this would fall within that
Absolutely.
realm of that title. It just needs to be added streets at some point in time.
Amended at that level. Okay, sorry, Councillor Twill, you had something?
Yeah, so that portion of Prince Street to Great George Street will still be, the civic addresses will still be Fitzroy.
That's correct. Yep, legally, 911, everything, the street signs will still remain up there. It's solely in memory of Carrie Wynn, just a memorial. It will be placed on its own separate post so that not to be confused, it's completely separate color. We went, as you're probably aware, all our street sign blades are with a green background and white lettering. This will be a blue background, so that is completely different, so to avoid any confusion to anyone using the street as well.
I'll move it, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Twill. Do I have someone to second this to go to council, or are there other questions before that? He's putting the resolution. He'll second. So all those in favor of this?
No,
Oh,
the resolution on the floor, Madam Chair, just point of.
His worship has a question on the
Yeah,
resolution.
just again, as you know, Scott, we renamed part of the street going down into Victoria Park, or Memorial Baseball Field, Warby Kennedy Way, and I don't think there was a name to that street. So this doesn't interfere with that at all. And I think that this is what Ocean 100 envisioned, is that there would be recognition, and not necessarily changing the civic addresses, but just giving, and we can do it on other streets, but as the chair said, we should ask the Standing Committee for Strategic Priorities and Communication to amend the naming policy to include streets.
Correct. Yeah.
So that going
And I
forward.
believe our director Sue Fraser has noted that. But I'll make sure to follow up with her and confirm that she will forward that on to that committee.
Thank you. So all of those in favor for this to move to council for approval? Everybody, thank you. Our last is our two tenders that Manager Scott would like to get moved to council. Okay, Scott?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Twill will be very excited about this one. Towers Road Multi-Use Pathway. Tender has closed. Submission of Duffy Construction in the amount of $659,230 plus all applicable taxes is being recommended to be accepted by committee and council from the Public Works Department.
Councillor Twill.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you. Just clarification purposes, it will be 8 feet in width, that's specifications.
I believe it is 8 feet wide. That's
8 feet
correct.
in width, and with the approval of city council, then the Duffy Construction can go ahead and proceed with the construction, correct?
That's what we hope to have passed here today, is to send this on to the next council meeting for a final award of this tender.
Thank you very much, Scott.
Thank you. Could I have someone move? Oops, go
Madam
ahead.
Chair?
Yes?
So, Scott, through the chair to our chief engineer, so if I look at the last month's meeting, Lilac and Cedar, we're parking those, that pathway, which is a saving of, I think, 8 to 900,000. I spoke to the chair about this, that, could we look at another part of the city to extend or build a new ATP, active transportation pathway, because there's a dire need everywhere. And I can name one right now, Norwood Road, and I know that's a long stretch, but if we could start it. I'm just trying to get some, public feedback on where we can go. And Madam Chair, I know it's just connected to this by, on Park and that Lilac and Cedar Avenue Trail project.
You're correct. So we have parked it, as discussed last meeting, to further review it, and that may involve a bigger discussion both at council level and at the community level, to try to further explain what we were trying to achieve and to get better feedback on that one. In the interim, a lot of those funds, some of those funds have been reallocated already as part of the sidewalk work that has been awarded last month at council. I believe that's when it was. Just because that, unfortunately, those tenders came in over budget. The remaining funds, we unfortunately, other than what's on the 5-year plan, we have no engineering services started on future pathways and sidewalk work. And so we would not be able to get anything out the door, anything new beyond what was already discussed at budget season.
So just quickly, Madam Chair, I'm just asking that Norwood Road is a priority. If you go out to Lewis Point, Orchardale Park, Scott Street, and Parkview Drive, those are priorities. So
Absolutely.
because people are, residents, pedestrians are walking on the street with children and mothers and fathers with baby carriages, and seniors. So I just want
They're
to.
on the list, so we just have to keep approving more money at budget time.
yeah.
And that's-
I just,
And-
there's some big priorities out there.
Yep.
And I've been down those streets, just like the counselor from Ward 8 and the counselor from Ward 5, that Ward 7, understand the situation. Thank you.
Yeah, and as previously noted in previous meetings, my intention is come September, bring all this back. So we have, right now, we are in year 2 of the 5-year plan. So we need to add 2 additional years to that 5-year plan. My thought is at that time, we can discuss the existing remaining 3 years. There is some changes already because we already adjusted Towers Road to this year. So there's lots of time for some discussion in September, and I think that's a great time to start talking about that. We'll have some more resources available on our side to provide more information for you folks. As right now we're full steam ahead right now, trying to keep up with all the work that's out there right now. And as well, it's a great time just as a great segue into budget season as well to be talking about that stuff.
Yep. It's
Thank
great.
you.
Adjustments are great, budgeting is great, love that idea. Thank you.
Yep,
Lyda.
no, and it's good, and it's good to come back and look at that sidewalk plan in the fall.
Chair?
One more question, Councillor
Yeah,
Twill?
just, in the, with all these different streets that are being mentioned here, I want to reiterate, I did reiterate at the council meeting, Scott, as you know, Mount Edward Road, one of the most busiest streets in the city of Charlottetown. A lot of heavy industrial traffic on that street. It's nonstop. As you know, it goes from 40 kilometers to 50 kilometers, and the west side of Mount Edward Road, the residents are very vulnerable.
We'll look at
So-
this again, Councillor Twill, in the fall when
No,
it comes.
I
Yep,
know, but my job is to
I know.
is to
So
bring
we'll-
it forward.
And mine is to
I
keep us
appreciate the work
flowing.
you're doing, Scott.
That's great.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. So could I have someone move the tender forward? Councillor Twill, seconded by Councillor McAleer. All those in favor? Thank you. And finally, one more tender, Scott?
Absolutely. So this one is for 2 municipal sidewalk tractors with attachments. So these are the piece of machinery you'll see clearing our sidewalks through the winter months. The low submission of Saunders equipment in the amount of $398,910 plus all applicable taxes. Public Works is recommending to accept and award this contract to Saunders Equipment.
Councillor Twill.
I approve the tender. But I recall back a few years ago when the city Public Works in particular purchased a number of sidewalk plows. I asked at the time, because as you know, in the older part of the city, a lot of the sidewalks are not 5 feet in width. Some of our sidewalks, I mean, Mr. McKinnon will tell you, are probably, 3 feet, 3.5 feet in width? And I was under the impression, or the message was conveyed to me, and now, Scott, I don't know if you were here or Mr. Johnson was here, but that we could be able to have the flexibility to switch the blades, because what's happening year after year after year after year, and this is it's not a criticism or being critical of the sidewalk plows, the width of these sidewalks, particularly the 3.5 feet, I'm sorry, when they're going down the street, they're ripping up the lawns, and it's the same thing every year. The residents get frustrated. The guys do a good job topsoiling. I know I'm always after Mr. McKinnon. They do a great job, but is there any possible way we can have blades that when you go into the older part of the city where we know that it's 3.5 feet, where we can make that switch and put those blades on so we're not ripping up these lawns, the same lawns year after year after year? It just seems to be counterproductive, if that's possible.
Unfortunately, no. And the reason is we need to cut a path the width of the machine. We need to cut a path the width of the machine so that the machine can safely get through. From plowing and blowing, right? We don't just plow, we also blow snow. And without cutting the width of the machine, your machine's going to get stuck. And so, no, they don't make them to do that. But just in terms of what you mentioned about the narrow sidewalks, we're well aware of it. And if you probably have noticed, anytime we're replacing large stretches of sidewalks, we're widening them out where we can. We're actually, as in Passmore Street, we're eliminating one sidewalk, widening out the other one. So it's going to be, there's going to be some bumps in the road. There's going to be still some growing pains as we get caught up and widen a lot of these sidewalks. But we're going to get there. We know the issue, and we're very familiar with it, and we'll definitely, you'll start to see some improvements going forward.
Thank you. Maybe that's why we're using multi-purpose trails too, with a wider lens.
So,
Do you have another question, Your Worship?
Just quickly, I know we have to get going, Madam Chair, but just wanted to ask the manager, this is within the budget that you provided for the capital budget 23-24, right?
That's correct, yep.
Are you below? I think you're below, aren't you not? Is it?
I can't remember the breakdown
But
of what we had for
it's within the
sidewalk
budget.
machines, but
Yep.
we're within budget for our overall large fleet purchases this year. That's correct.
It's moved by His Worship. It's seconded by Councillor Twill. All those in favor of moving this to council? Thank you. And before we have introduction to new business, Scott, we talked today. You got to remind me what I want to talk about for next time. Oh, crosswalk. Was it crosswalk? So I've had some requests coming in my way about crosswalk paint when the sidewalk ends to the next road where the sidewalk picks up. And that's not typically what we do, so I've asked Scott to come back and kind of report that to us next time. So that was something I wanted added for next time. Anything else
I
that
wanted
anybody
to add
has?
something for the next meeting,
Yes.
Madam Chair. As I stated in the last meeting about the Communities in Bloom for next year, I know that Joey and Rebecca are doing a lot of work in the beautification part of it. But if you look at last year's budget and this year's budget for trees, flowers, and so forth, are we consistent, or are we below, or are we up?
We're pretty consistent in where we have been.
Okay, so I just want to put that.
We'll have that on our agenda to look at that for
just to get
next
some
meeting,
information.
Communities in Bloom. And I want to end this meeting before I close to say thank you very much for a very efficient and respectful meeting. We've been able to get through all the business in a timely manner, so that's wonderful. Thank you very much.
I appreciate
And
your
I need
chairing of this meeting, Madam Chair,
Yes,
very
sure.
much.
I need someone to put forward an adjournment. Adjourned by His Worship, second by, thank you.